Welcome back to Bridge 4 as we continue our detailed summary recap of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time book series. Today's video covers chapters 10 through 12 of Book 1, The Eye of the World. Today, the Fellowship begins their journey. Chapter 10, Leave Taking. Leave Taking is a chapter title which you're going to see 4 times in the first 5 books of the series, and as of today, Episode 1 of Amazon's upcoming show is titled Leave Taking. In this first ever leave-taking chapter, Rand, Matt, and Lan went to the stables where Lan had previously sent Perrin to make sure that the stables were empty of people. Matt noticed that Perrin was holding a battle axe. Turns out, Master Luhan had made it for someone 2 years prior, but the guy who had asked for it to be made reneged on the deal. So Master Luhan had given it to Perrin after he caught Perrin practicing with it. Perrin was embarrassed when he admitted that part of the story to his friends. Keep your eye on this axe as it plays a material role in Perrin's character arc. Back to the group in the stables though. Previously, Moraine had told the 3 boys not to tell anyone that they were leaving. So Matt and Perrin had left letters for their loved ones. But we already know that Rand had told his father that he was leaving, and his father had agreed that it was the right thing to do. As Rand told him about this, Moraine walked in and she overheard. Lan was angered by this because Lan does not like when plans change. Moraine took it in stride though. She chalked it up as to being part of the pattern. But then Egwene unexpectedly showed up because Egwene had seen Matt and Perrin trying to sneak around and doing a pretty bad job of it. And she had also noticed that Lan was buying extra horses. This shows us that Egwene is observant and intelligent. Elaine's arrival marks the second time the plans were changed, so once again, Lan was annoyed, but once again on the flip side, Moraine brushed it off as being part of the pattern. Lan said that Egwene could ride the Gleeman's horse, and he'd leave money for the Gleeman to buy another, at which point, Tom the Gleeman spoke out from up in the hayloft, saying that will not be possible, because he was leaving town as well. And remember, Lan had told Perrin to make sure that the stables were empty, but Perrin had not checked the loft. So the Gleeman's arrival marks the 3rd change in plans, and now they needed one more horse, a horse for Egwene. Rand suggested that she take his father's horse, Bella. Take note of this horse because, minor spoiler warning, Bella is a Wheel of Time fan favorite. Okay, this is the group, at least the initial group. Rand, Matt, and Perrin, Lan and Moraine, Tom the Gleeman, and Egwene. As they are leaving, they see the newly formed village watch ride by with crude weapons and helmets and pieces of armor that had lain dust-covered in attics for generations. When the sight cleared, the newly formed group headed out, paralleling the north road that led to Taran Ferry. It's worth noting that Lan pointed out how he likes the sounds of wolves, because wolves and dogs do not like Trollocs, so when Lan hears wolves, he is sure that there are no Trollocs around. Chapter 10 ended with Rand noticing something flying in the sky, something like a bat, but the size of a man. Lan and Tom explained that it was a Draghkar, which is yet another type of shadow spawn created after the Age of Legends. Moraine highlighted that if the Myrddraal had a Draghkar at its command, then the Myrddraal would soon know where they were, if he did not already. That meant they needed to move faster than they could cross-country, so Lan gave them new direction, quote, "We take to the North Road now. For your lives, follow my lead. Keep up and keep together." Chapter 11, The Road to Taran Ferry. The chapter begins with the group racing north in a tight line. Lan led the group, and Rand took up the rear. Rand noticed that his horse, named Cloud, was racing with an eagerness to go fast. Rand had to actually hold Cloud back a little bit. Strangely enough, Rand noticed that even his father's workhorse, the stout Bella, she was keeping pace. Still, Rand worried for Egwene and Bella, wondering what would Lan and Moraine do if Bella lagged behind. Would they slow down or would they leave Egwene behind? He didn't know. But Rand knew that regardless, if Bella fell back, he would fall back too, whatever Moraine and Lan had to say about it. Then, abruptly, Lan slowed. To his surprise, Rand realized that they had already traveled as far as Watch Hill. The people of Watch Hill were still celebrating Beltane, and Matt commented that Watch Hill is the furthest that he had ever been from Emmons Field. Excluding Moraine and Lan, everyone looked tired, especially the horses. Tom mentioned resting a couple hours, and Rand assumed that they'd be spending the night there. But nope. Lan sharply pointed out that they could not stop for more than a few minutes until they crossed the Taran River. Rand was confused. What about the horses? Then he noticed that Moraine Sedai was walking up to each of the horses and magically recharging them, washing away their fatigue one by one, including the fatigue of the riders, except for Lan, who did not yet need any recharging. And unfortunately, Moraine does not have the ability to recharge herself. Then, out of nowhere, the Draghkar reappeared, beating its wings at Rand with a feel like the touch of slime. Rand barely hung on to Cloud's reins as Cloud panicked. In fact, everyone clutched the reins against the jerking heads of their mounts. Well, everyone except for Lan and Moraine. Moraine sat straight in her saddle, the white mare stepping delicately away from the confusion as if nothing at all out of the ordinary had happened. "Mount," Lan commanded curtly, claiming that the Draghkar would not have showed itself unless it had already reported their whereabouts to the Myrddraal. So, everyone mounted their horses, except for Rand, who found himself staring at the sky with Tam's sword in his hand as if to fight the flying thing. And it's worth noting that Rand heard dogs barking in the village, which shows that he's quickly adopting valuable instincts for these new and trying times. The horses then sped away at maximum speed, and even stout Bella matched the larger horses every stride. Rand realized that the Aes Sedai must have done something more than simply ridding her of fatigue. The Draghkar was shrieking in the night above them, yet, as they rode strong, Rand noticed Egwene smiling ear to ear. She was loving it. Then, they entered an icy fog, a mist seemingly of Moraine's creation. They rode for what felt like hours, and fatigue set in once again. "Slow," Lan called suddenly. "Draw rein." They had reached Taran Ferry. Chapter 12. Across the Taran. The Taran was wide and deep, with treacherous currents that could pull under the strongest swimmer. Much wider than the wine-spring water, Rand supposed, and the thick fog was still there, limiting their sight, but also hiding them from the Draghkar. Lan banged on Master Hightower's door and commanded that they be brought across the river right away, for a healthy price, half before and half once they reached the other side. Master Hightower went to go get his crew, and our crew met them at the ferry. As they pulled up, Rand saw Lan pull back Perrin's cloak, exposing Perrin's great axe. So Rand tossed his own cloak over his shoulder to show his sword. And then, bobbing lights appeared in the mist, and muffled footsteps approached. Master Hightower and 6 stolid-faced men in rough clothes carrying torches. Lan leaned against his saddle with apparent casualness, but one hand rested ostentatiously on the long hilt of his sword. Rand attempted to copy Lan's pose. Perrin eased his axe in its leather loop and planted his feet deliberately. Matt put a hand to his quiver, and Tom held up an empty hand, then summoned a dagger, twirled it around, and then nonchalantly began trimming his fingernails. Moraine quietly laughed, and Egwene clapped as if watching a performance at a festival, then stopped and looked abashed, though her mouth twitched with a smile just the same. But Master Hightower and his men got the hint. This was not a group to be messed with. So they and their horses boarded the ferry. They got to the other side, and in addition to the second half of the payment, Moraine offered a silver to each of Master Hightower's 6 crewmen. It was a trick. The crew had to get off of the ferry to collect the payment, and when that happened, Moraine secretly sabotaged the ferry, sending it into a faster and faster spiral, as if caught in a whirlpool. "An unfortunate occurrence," Moraine casually commented. "Unfortunate," Lan agreed in a flat tone. "It seems you'll be carrying no one else across the river for a time." Rand then noticed the clear sky on this side of the river, yet the heavy mist still hung to the shoreline behind them. Moraine then bragged to Lan that there were not 10 women in Tar Valon who could create such a perfect mist unaided, let alone from the back of a galloping horse. Tom asked why Moraine chose not to continue cloaking their way in mist. and the reason was because Draghkar are not very smart. Moiraine believed that the Draghkar would tell the Myrddraal that this new side of the river was clear, yet the river itself was cloaked for miles in both directions, and that would cause the Myrddraal to wonder whether they escaped down the river. That would buy the group some time as the Myrddraal figured out which way they went. Not far off, Land led them to a familiar spot of his where they could rest, and when they got there, Moiraine asked Egwene to speak privately. Rand noticed that the horses did not seem tired, but Land explained that the horses were tired. They just didn't know that they were tired, that the horses would run their fastest if they let them, right up to the second they dropped dead from exhaustion that they never even felt. So they would need to go slowly with the horses for the next few days until they recovered, more slowly than he would like, but with luck, it would be enough. Then they heard the Draghkar, but its screams eventually faded into the distance. Luck, Land breathed. It searches the river for us. Rand crawled on hands and knees through the opening in the tangle of the trees and down a short tunnel, and then he saw Moiraine and Egwene sitting cross-legged, facing one another beside the fire, discussing the One Power. The One Power, Moiraine was saying, comes from the true source, the driving force of creation, the force the Creator made to turn the wheel of time. She put her hands together in front of her and pushed them against each other. saidin, the male half of the true source, and saidar, the female half, work against each other and at the same time together to provide the force. saidin, she lifted one hand, then let it drop, is fouled by the touch of the Dark One, like water with a thin slick of rancid oil floating on top. The water is still pure, but it cannot be touched without feeling the foulness. Only saidar is safe to be used. Egwene's back was to Rand. He could not see her face, but she was leaning forward, eagerly. The boys and Tom tried to discreetly listen to the conversation. No, Moiraine said in answer to a question Rand had missed. The true source cannot be used up, any more than the river can be used up by the wheel of a windmill. The source is the river, the Aes Sedai, the water wheel. And you really think I can learn? Egwene asked. Her face shone with eagerness. Rand had never seen her look so beautiful, or so far away from him. I can become an Aes Sedai? At hearing this, Rand jumped up, hitting his head on the roof. Tom then sympathetically told Rand that, "It's beyond you now, boy." Moiraine went on to tell Egwene that only a few can learn to touch the true source and use the One Power. But Egwene is one of the bare handful for whom there is no need to learn. Touching the source would come to Egwene whether she wanted it or not. But if she wanted to learn to channel it fully, Egwene would have to study at Tar Valon. Moiraine also pointed out how men who have the ability to touch saidin born in them die if the Red Aja does not find them and gentle them. And some women die too, because it is difficult to learn without a guide. The women who they do not find, those that live, often become wisdoms of their villages. Very interesting. Moiraine claimed that the old blood is strong in Emond's Field, and she knew Egwene for what she was the moment she first saw her in Emond's Field, because no Aes Sedai can stand in the presence of a woman who can channel or who is close to her change and not feel it. And Egwene is very close to her change, her first touching. So it would be better if Moiraine guided her through it, so as to avoid the unpleasant effects that come to those who must find their own way. Moiraine told Egwene to look at her blue stone and let her mind drift, and Rand saw light bloom in the stone. A flash came, and then another, pulsing, then one last feeble flicker before it was merely a stone again. Egwene apologized for having wasted Moraine's time, but nope, I have wasted nothing, child, Moiraine said. That last light was yours alone. It usually takes months of study for women to do what Egwene did on her first try, so the chapter ends with Moiraine saying, "You may go far, perhaps even the Amarlin seat one day, if you study hard and work hard."